Hey everyone, it's Zack Beck. In the raging debate on student loan forgiveness, we finally have an answer. That is because President Joe Biden has just announced that he will cancel up to $10,000 in federal student loan debt for millions of borrowers. Now, this has significant implications for millions of people throughout the country, as well as people on both sides of the debate who argue vociferously as to whether or not this is even fair. So what I want to do in this video is break down in detail everything associated with this particular executive action, how it could impact you directly, the specific steps you might need to take if you're actually having your student loans forgiven, and also the bigger picture debate about what is going on with this in our country, how this impacts inflation, and ultimately how this can impact your personal financial situation. So let's take our time, dive in the details, and jump into it right now. As previously mentioned, the federal government has canceled $10,000 in student loan debt. This is a significant executive action by the president, and it does have a ripple effect throughout our economy, specifically as it relates to inflation. Now, when it comes to the amount that's actually forgiven, it varies depending upon whether or not you received a Pell Grant. Now, if you received a Pell Grant, you're actually eligible to receive up to $20,000 in student loan forgiveness. You might be asking yourself, well, how do I know if I actually received a student loan and actually had a Pell Grant associated with it? Well, actually, out of the 43 million Americans who've had student loans, nearly 60% of those people actually received a Pell Grant. This is generally for lower income individuals. The way you can actually find this out is if you go onto the Department of Education's website, you can actually search there and determine whether or not you actually received a Pell Grant, or you could talk to your university or your college, go to your financial institution who's associated with that, and you'll be able to answer that question for you. Now, bigger picture, what we're looking at here is a significant executive action taken by President Joe Biden. So what I want to talk about right now a little bit is about what this actually means for our economy as a whole, because we are already spending billions of dollars throughout our economy over the course of the last number of years, specifically since the pandemic hit. Now, with the pandemic came the CARES Act, then they had the American Rescue Plan, now we've had the Inflation Reduction Act, and all sorts of other executive actions that have actually triggered us to spend trillions of dollars over the course of the last year. This has drawn up us to have nearly 40-year high inflation and a lot of concerns in our economy as to whether or not we're going to be able to weather this storm. Now, when we throw in an additional $500 billion when we're actually having student loans forgiven, people are wondering, is this going to make inflation worse? Now, that's a question for us to consider. It has potentially some significant implications, but when we think about this from a macroeconomic scale, we will also see that this could potentially even drive more money into the economy because people might have more discretionary income now since they're not making student loan payments. Now, what you did have happen during the pandemic is student loan payments were actually paused, so from that vantage point, you might argue that some of this money is already flowing into the economy, but now people might have a little more flexibility. Now, that's one side of the argument. Now, on the other side of the equation, you might have people arguing and saying this is actually going to cause people to spend less money because they're going to now save this money maybe for bigger purchases like a home, a car, or be able to start a family or things to that extent. Now, that is really up to the discretion of the debate of people on both sides of this argument. You will have people saying this is really too much government spending. There's not a fair approach to this because people like myself or others who actually went and paid for college on the way throughout and didn't actually take out a loan are now not getting that reward, whereas people who took out a loan maybe when they shouldn't have are now getting rewarded by having $10,000 or up to $20,000 forgiven. So you can see why this creates so much tension on both sides of the aisle. I'm not here to really take a side on anything in this regard because, quite frankly, I understand the arguments from both perspectives. But what I will say is that my bigger concern is from a macroeconomic scale, an additional $500 billion of government spending is probably not the best thing for us to be doing right now at this time when we're already seeing inflation running rampant. You might be asking yourself, well, Zach, how do I know if I qualify for this student loan forgiveness? Well, here it is. If you're an individual that makes up to $125,000, then you're eligible to actually receive the student loan forgiveness. If you're a married couple who makes up to $250,000, you are eligible as well. But if you exceed those economic thresholds, you're not going to be eligible for this student loan forgiveness. You'll really want to look at your previous year's tax returns, see what your actually adjusted gross income is, and that should give you a determination of whether or not you're going to qualify. Now, when you're thinking about this, what specific loans actually qualify for this? These are specifically for federal student loans. So if you had a private loan, it most likely does not qualify in this instance, but there might be some exceptions the Education Department is looking into in this regard. But ultimately, if you're one of the over 37 million to 43 million individuals who took out student loans from the federal government, then this will qualify if you meet those economic thresholds. Now, the reason why I gave that range of 37 million to 43 million individuals who have student loans from the federal government is because what we have right now is there's the Federal Family Education Loan loan program, and that may actually be excluded. The Education Department is considering that, but there's roughly 5 to 6 million borrowers who took out loans through that specific program, and those are commercially backed loans. So if you are one of the people who does have a loan from that, you really want to wait a little bit and don't get too far ahead of yourself, because those loans right now are technically excluded, but that language could change specifically because the Education Department is looking into this. So that's why I want to give you that range. We have about 37 million to 43 million individuals who have student loans that are likely to be forgiven. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, Zach, what if I owe less than $10,000? Am I still able to have my loans forgiven? Yes, the answer is yes. The Education Department will basically have your balance completely taken care of up to the eligible amount, up to $10,000. So if you owe $8,000, you'll have $8,000 taken out. If you have $7,000 owed, you'll have $7,000 taken out. So basically that is what you need to know. It's just going to be capped at $10,000 unless you have Pell Grant, then it's up to $20,000. You might be asking yourself, well, when is the loan cutoff date? Does this apply to something that's happening right now? Well, technically what the Education Department said is that loans that were taken out after June 30th, 2022 will not be eligible for this program. So if you're someone who's actually taking classes in the fall of 2023, you're not going to be eligible for this. So just think about that from your perspective as you're going through this process right now. You might be saying to yourself, well, Zach, do I have to do anything in order to apply for this? The answer is yes. What you're going to find though is that the Education Department is putting together a website where you're going to have an application process. So you'll want to be very diligent about this. You can actually go onto the website associated with the Education Department, and then if you go on there, you can sign up for updates, and they will notify everyone when it's actually time to go and enroll and have the opportunity to have your loans forgiven. So just know that this isn't something necessarily that's going to happen automatically for you. You will have a little work that's needed to be done, but that has not been detailed out in specificity yet from the Education Department. So you really want to take your time to make sure you're doing that to have your loan forgiven. You might be wondering, well, Zach, am I going to owe taxes associated with this? The answer is for federal government, no, but for state government, possibly. So you're going to want to be very diligent when you go through this process, that you don't want to get triggered with a huge tax bill that you're going to be surprised by later on down the line. So what you want to think through is that from a federal government perspective, you're not going to owe any income taxes on this, but you might owe income taxes or some other form of taxes associated with this if you're living in a specific state. Now that list does not exist yet, but it's something you're going to have to take into consideration because this is a new territory that we're entering into, because like I said before, this is an unprecedented executive action by the president. One thing I would recommend doing is that if you're someone who does have an outstanding balance, take a screenshot of that, find your balance statement, make sure you have some sort of copy of that you have eligible right now in your possession. So that way, if it comes down the line and your loan doesn't get forgiven, but the federal government says it did get forgiven, you can show them that the balance is not the same anymore, or it's remained the same, whatever it might be. I will just say, given my experience working in public, private, and specifically the nonprofit sector, but most of all in the governmental space, it does take time and sometimes there will be errors. And if that is the case, you want to be backing yourself up with any sort of proven document that shows what your current balance is. And hopefully after the action has been taken, it's been reduced by $10,000. But if it hasn't, you need to have that document in your possession to be able to demonstrate that and show that so that you can have your loan forgiven. You might be saying to yourself, well, Zach, what is the timeline associated with this? Well, it's very unclear as to how long it's going to take them to actually forgive these loans, but what I do know right now is that the application deadline is December 31st, 2023. So you do have time to actually get this situated, but like I said before, government takes time. It can be a little bit slow occasionally. So if you're one of these individuals of the 37 million to 43 million individuals who are looking to have your loans forgiven, you're gonna wanna go through the application process as soon as it becomes available, because that could take nearly a year for them to process, and you do not want to miss that deadline, because otherwise you're going to be out of luck. Just so you know, it's not going to automatically happen for you. You're going to have to take some action on your own part to make this happen for yourself. So go for it. Get on the student loan website, specifically on the federal government's website for the Department of Education, and you'll be able to get through that process once they open up the application. When it comes to this unprecedented executive action by President Biden, there are a lot of opinions associated with it. You have people on one side of the aisle who say this is completely fair because people who have taken out too much debt are now no longer able to move forward in their lives because they cannot purchase a home, purchase a car, start a family, contribute to the economy because they're being weighed down by this debt. Now, one thing I will say is that for myself, the borrower is always slave to the lender. So from that vantage point, unfortunately, when you go and take out debt, it is a risk associated with that. I know this is a different kind of debt because you're not necessarily going and buying a flat screen TV or taking a vacation to Hawaii or whatever it might be. You're investing in yourself and your education so that way you can go and contribute to society. So I understand that. But from the vantage point of those who are arguing in favor of it, they say it's fair, but it doesn't really matter whether or not it's fair. It happened. The president made this action take place. Now, it could face a legal challenge. There are some stirrings along associated with that, specifically from the Heritage Foundation, where you might see this being challenged in court. We'll see what comes of that. That could get litigated for years. Who knows? But what I will say is there is the other side of the aisle who does say this is not fair, that people who actually went through the process, they paid their bills on time, they did not take out loans, or they paid their loans back in full, are now not going to be able to get paid that $10,000 that the others are going to receive. And I would say there's a validity to that argument, but unfortunately in life sometimes things are unfair. Our government is not perfect. Politics play a huge role in the decisions that are made at the executive level, and because of that, we're finding this is what's going on right now. Also, you could have some people who argue and say, well, we've bailed out the auto industry, we've bailed out the financial industry, we've bailed out other industries before, so it's okay to bail out, the individual people who are going through this process. I get that, but I think maybe we should just get out of the industry of bailing out anyone, because for the most part, we shouldn't be getting into these inflated sort of situations where we're either spending too much money that we don't have, we're overinflating a specific sector and that doesn't produce anything positive for the economy, and then ultimately the taxpayer gets footed with a bill. So that's just a few of my thoughts I have with this. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, so please comment down below and let me know what you think, because I know this is a very personal issue. Once again, I understand where both sides are coming from, but I will say it is unprecedented to have an executive action taken place where we're going to be spending $500 billion extra dollars as a federal government. That's on top of all the trillions of dollars that we've spent over the course of this pandemic. So it'll be interesting to see where we go from here. While what I will say is that if you are one of those people who are going to benefit from this, congratulations to you. I hope that it actually does make a positive difference in your life. Hopefully you can take those resources and make them as effective as possible by doing what you can to contribute to this world and make a difference in your own life, by starting a family, by getting the kind of house you want or whatever it might be, or just simply being able to have a little more buffer and not living paycheck to paycheck anymore. But try and never find yourself in a situation again by taking out additional debt where you're not going to be able to have that forgiven. So let this be a lesson for everyone that this is an unprecedented action. It probably won't happen again. So just make sure you're making the most of this opportunity. With all that being said, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. If you wouldn't mind, please tap the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Help push this video to other people who might need to hear it. Furthermore, if you have any questions, please comment down below. I'd love to interact with you, get to know you, do any research on your behalf so that you can make well and wise informed decisions moving forward. Furthermore, if you wouldn't mind, please subscribe to the channel. That would mean a lot to myself personally, as I do everything I can to try and create positive content that makes a positive difference in your life by encouraging you and myself to lead lives of meaning and purpose, all while maintaining balance and moderation. And if you wouldn't mind, if you do subscribe to the channel, please tap the notification bell. That will notify you every time I post a video, which I do on a weekly basis. Once again, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. I hope you have a wonderful day. Talk to you next time.